Okay, this is a super old story. It was actually published in this about 1 million years ago, but it is on theme. So here we go. The in and out. Edith leaned into her cane and waited for the maid to quit ignoring her. The backs of Conchita's thighs jiggled as she scrubbed. She bent down into the pink tub, and the hem of her dress rose, revealing a tiny smile of white cotton with a few black hairs curling around the sides. Edith struck a match and sucked a puff. Conchita jerked upright. Senora Edith. She placed a hand on her chest, emphasizing the sheen of sweat on her bosom. Edith said, I paid that Carlisle glutton $2,500 to lacquer the sinks and tubs. You're scrubbing too hard. Conchita held up the sponge and ran her finger along its blue underside. This very soft, she said. Dimples puckered her pudgy cheeks. No hay problema. Just that morning, Edith had heard Conchita talking English to another Mexican. If she could talk English to a Mexican, why did she talk Mexican to Edith? One of her kids swelled in the corner, staring at Edith round-eyed. Edith disliked cats equally and for the same reason. He ain't got business in this place, said Edith. Conchita turned the shower on and sloshed the water through the soapy tub. Juan Pablo, he's my helper. He'll break something, and I won't pay for it. You'll pay for it. You comprendo. It's okay, said Conchita. He helped me. The child put his dirty fingers in his mouth and drooled on them. Edith's guts churned. On her way out of room 6, she saw her reflection in the mirrored wall. She didn't look directly. She was a curved line, a question mark, an ironed dress. Just get your rug rat off my property, Edith said in the doorway. This sure as hell ain't a daycare center. She hobbled into the soupy glare outside. Edith snively, slurred, gimped, and was plenty old. A stroke had knocked her left side out of order. She breasted back just enough control to drag herself around the in and out without wheels. Cigarettes had cobwebbed her lungs and sucked her skin yellow-gray. Edith's beauty had not faded over the years. She'd never had any to begin with. The Lord gave baby Edith a hook nose, hen eyes, and a landslide chin. Town talk had it that Ivan Snivy only married Edith for her white Ford truck, which was new when they got hitched in '64. The first thing the newlyweds did was pack it up for a honeymoon across the border. Ivan was just 18, 3 years Edith's junior, and could not get enough of his ugly bride. He favored the by-the-hour motels just outside Mexican towns. Pull over, Edie, there's another one, he'd say. Edith didn't argue. She liked them, too. Her favorite rooms had hearts stenciled on the walls, but some had grease stains, cracks, water damage, holes plugged with toilet paper. Others had mirrors on the ceilings, above the beds. Some crawled with palm-sized roaches, and some smelled of bleach. One had a snake. They were all hot and loud with funny Mexican music. They were all private, which no inch of Dalton pretended to be. One wet and naked honeymoon afternoon, Ivan smiled to Edith in the ceiling mirror and said, You know what, baby? Dalton could use one of these places. Ivan sucked his mustache between his lips, which Edith knew was his planning face. Oh, said Edith, can you imagine what would happen? You think they'd be as bad as us? She laughed and Ivan grinned. They spent hours betting on who would cheat on whom with whom. A few days later, Edith won the grand prize. They were driving into a dust-choked town a couple hours south of Nogales when they passed a girl walking beside the road. Her hair reached almost to her knees and shone like an oil slick in the late afternoon sun. Ivan slowed the truck. He leaned right across Edith's lap to whistle out the window. Late that night, Ivan revved up the truck and headed for the local cantina, claiming he needed a beer. Well, it was a tall one. Ivan didn't return. Not that night, nor the next day, nor the one after. Edith waited in the room, quiet as a mouse, while music and headboards bumpity-bumped the walls. She watched herself float in the mirror over the bed. She stayed there for a week, dumbly hoping Ivan would crawl back and knowing all along that once he'd gotten away from her, he was gone. Edith returned to Dalton by bus, shamed. But she had a feel for what the town was missing. So So when Matilda Mathers asked publicly why Edith couldn't keep a man even 2 weeks, Edith just pretended not to hear. She curled her into herself and waited. When her daddy kicked the bucket, Edith sold the family house and bought 3 bone-dry acres a few miles outside of town along Old Highway 12. The In-N-Out was Ivan's bastard child. Each room at the In-N-Out had a private garage to hide patrons' cars from nosy eyes. Everything inside was either light pink or blood red, and it was all bolted down. A menu hung above each bed offering booze, cigs, and sex toys. Edith took phone orders and passed the merchandise through sliding doors built into the walls. Only Edith and Conchita knew what went on in the rooms because they mopped up the aftermath. On Saturday night at 11:11 by the digital clock, a thin boy in thick-rimmed glasses entered the reservation office, interrupting Edith, who was staring at her uneven fingernails and hating Conchita. The boy had a crooked nose and his forehead was lumpy with acne. He looked about 17. "I'll take a single," said the boy. Without looking up, he had a funny accent. "We only have kings." He nodded, barely moving. "How many hours you want it for?" The boy cocked his head. Edith realized she was drooling and wiped her mouth on the back of her wrist. "Speak English," she said. "How many hours you want?" Give me a week." Edith squinted. She didn't give a damn what people did to themselves, but she'd been shortchanged enough times to dislike junkies, and they were the only people who stayed more than 2 nights running. "Wait," said the kid. He rocked back on his heels, shoved his hands into his pockets, and produced a fistful of bills, which he heaped onto the countertop. Edith unfolded more than enough 20s to ease her mind. She handed over the key to room 14, saying, "Don't make a mess." The kid tried to open the door from the hinge side, then pushed instead of pulling. He shuffled out to a dark hatchback. The car coughed like a pack-a-day smoker, then disappeared into the shadows. Edith heard the garage door to 14 roll up and then down. Well, just after 1 o'clock in the morning, the boy called and ordered a 5th of Jack Daniels. Well, he sure wasn't 21, but Edith was too curious to turn him down. She scraped across the lot and pushed the bottle through the sliding door. She leaned close to the opening and listened. The drawer nearly bonked her face when it slid back out, bearing a 20 and a 5. The only sound was the air conditioner chugging away. The next morning, being Sunday, Edith donned loafers and a gray cotton dress to match her gray hair and drove her rattle-trap station wagon 4 miles to the First Methodist Church of Dalton. It was a squat white building shaped like a shoebox and surrounded by square-cut hedges. She arrived late, as always, and sat in the back row by the open door. A few children screwed their heads around to gawk. The congregation sat on folding chairs and sang. Edith mouthed the words because she didn't care for her voice. She felt the comfort of Sunday wash over her. There, in the far corner of the room, shone the rimless spectacles of Dr. Kelman, and there was his little wife with her perfect hair. Wouldn't Mrs. Kelman love to know that her husband and his hygienist had left a head pillow caked with semen on Tuesday morning? "Joy, joy is in my heart," sang Dr. Kelman. Edith saw Mary McGaff's strawberry blonde curls near the front of the room. She turned her head and there was an attractive pink flush on her cheek. She taught algebra at Dalton High. She brought Danny Rossing, one of her students, to the In-N-Out on Wednesdays after school. Once, she had a 2-eyed Jack double-headed dildo delivered to the room. "Joy, joy's in my heart," sang Miss McGaff. "Joy, joy's in my heart," sang Danny Rossing's parents. "Joy, joy's in my heart," mouthed Edith. The song ended. Pastor Shreve was blonde and young and had big ears. He gripped the plain wooden pulpit and yammered. "We live in a landscape dotted not with shrines not of golden calves but of golden arches," said Pastor Shreve. The sermon had something to do with gluttony. Bloody Jesus hung behind him looking bored. Edith was not bored. Bob Garcia and Larry Dole sat nearby, each surrounded by his family. They sometimes had sex after Monday Night Football. Bob took his wife's hand and smiled. Edith choked on the laugh. She gave the loose skin on the back of her hand a pinch to regain control. The ridge stayed. Edith noticed Officer Kaufman front and center, and a chuckle escaped through her nose, which she masked by making her chair squeak. Officer Kaufman was a messy homosexual. He sometimes came late at night with a drifter or drug kid slouched in the back of an unmarked car and left the sheets smeared with shit and sometimes blood. Conchita had burned more than one set of sheets after a visit from Officer Kaufman. There in the back of the church, Edith took her fill of entertainment. She struggled to her feet before the sermon ended and fired a cigarette in the doorway. She hobbled out to the car and bumped back down the road to the In-N-Out to await her customers. Idiotic telephone break. I have this in pieces. Monday afternoon stretched out dumb and yellow like the fat rat snake Edith sometimes caught sunning on the tank behind the laundry room. Edith dragged her body around the In-N-Out, checking the rooms after the weekend rush. In 8, Edith found a rubber cock ring under the sink. In room 12, Conchita had neglected to restock the complimentary condoms. The wall mirrors in room 13 were smeared with sweat or semen or spit. Edith hesitated by the garage of room 14. The boy hadn't turned off the air conditioning unit once since Saturday night. She was worried it would eat up her profit. But since he paid in advance, there wasn't much she could do. Instead, Edith hobbled in search of Conchita to share a piece of her mind about the mess. She twisted the cock ring between the fingers of her good hand. Edith found the maid mashed against the wall of the laundry room under Ed Finkel, the plumber. Edith gonged her head against the washing machine. Conchita shoved Ed off her, making a big show of it. She scurried past Edith out into the parking lot, tugging at her dress and gulping like a beached fish. Edith didn't buy it for a minute. She'd seen what she'd seen. Ed got a kerchief out of his pocket and wiped his brow. Edith pointed the end of her cane at him. "Get that clog fixed?" she said. "You'll get my bill in the mail. I hope you won't charge extra for rooting my maid." "You ain't one to judge. Next time I'll call the Morrisons with my plumbing needs. You can get off my property now." Ed gobbed on the floor. "You ain't one to judge, Edith Snivy. You built the devil a house in this town." He stalked out to the parking lot, climbed into his F-250 and headed out the driveway, kicking up enough dust for a stampede. His tailgate said, "Finkel can fix it." Edith leaned back against the washing machine and it vibrated all through her bones. Broken things stayed broken, no matter how many nails or years you stuck in them. The pink sheets falling down and flying up in the dryer made her want to upchuck lunch. Conchita minced into the office with her eyebrows inverted like a cherub's. "Ay, Senora Edith, you saved my life. That descarado, he attacked me, and if you don't come, I don't know what happened to me." Her fingers fluttered up to cover her eyes. Edith could tell she was faking. Fake tears, fake nails, fake gratitude. She gave her a long, hard look to shut her up. "You cleaned 14 yet today," she said. Conchita plopped onto the arm of a red leather sofa opposite Edith and the reservation desk. Some of the fat from her rear ballooned into her breasts. She sniffed. "I tried. You don't come to the door." "You ain't cleaned once in 3 days." "No." Conchita's eyes were round and sparkling. "The guy, he don't come to the door. You don't even say go away, nothing." She crossed her arms over her breasts and pushed the fat back down. "He is doing drugs in there. Va a destruir el cuarto." "Do not disturb sign up?" "See, all the time." Edith slapped the desk with the flat of her hand. "Well, what the hell do you think that means? Do not disturb. It means you keep clear of that room." Idiotic phone interlude over. Edith pulled the garage door of room 14 down behind her. The rusty Subaru looked abandoned. It had that settled attitude, though it had only been still for 3 days. Edith scraped gingerly past, feeling like it might jump up and bite her. The "Do Not Disturb" sign hung undisturbed from the doorknob. Edith knocked. Nothing. She pressed her ear against the door and heard the air conditioning unit humming away. She extracted the knot of keys from her dress pocket, found the one marked 14, and put it to use. The door swung open. The room was tidy and pink and red and mirrored just as she'd left it. There was nothing to see but a dead boy on the bed in his underwear. The boy's face was turned sharply away like he'd been slapped. His body looked long, narrow, and paper white across the room. One leg was bent and his arms were extended like a ballet dancer mid-turn. The liquor bottle lay on the bed next to him. It's got spilled. The whiskey reeked. Edith cleared her throat. "That's a ruined mattress," she said. She thumped her cane on the floor, but no apology came. Edith had never seen a young corpse, only her daddy laid out in his casket, strangling a bouquet of forget-me-nots. He'd died a bit over a time over decades, so he looked about the same alive as dead, rotting on the vine. But here was something done. Here was a weight. She locked the door behind her and hobbled to the bed. She sat facing away from the corpse. On the pink night table between the red telephone and the red ashtray, the boy's glasses were folded nicely. Beside them was an orange prescription pill bottle with a white top, erect and clean. Sure, it was empty. Edith tipped back against the headboard and pulled her bad leg up with her good arm. She wiggled down to examine the stiff up close. His skin reminded her of wax paper, shiny and semi-transparent, bluish veins spidered under the surface. The boy's lips were purple-gray, and the tip of his tongue rested in the nook. He had a bruised and puffy neck like he'd been choked. Here, the kid had come to die a quiet and private death, surely doing himself and the world a favor. And it was violent anyway. She squeezed the boy's forearm. It was marble. She fought to unbend the fingers of his hand, but didn't have the strength. In the end, she closed her hand over his. Edith struggled her old body down next to the boy's and rested her head on his shoulder. She flopped her lame arm across his rib cage. In the mirror above, Edith saw her grayness curled around his whiteness, the two of them floating. The mirror shook and blurred. Quietly she wept.